Is this the beginning of the end for Jack Grealish? City have already signed the likes of Jeremy Doku, and with the newly signed Brazilian wonderkid Savio set to stay at Manchester City rather than going out on loan, there's clearly a new vision for Pep and Manchester City's wide players. Jack Grealish had a phenomenal season during City's treble-winning campaign, getting 16 goal contributions from 3,495 minutes, but the following season saw Grealish's minutes reduced to 2,124 due to numerous injuries as well as the arrival of Jeremy Doku. Grealish's goal contribution reduced to 6 across all competitions during the 23-24 season, but Grealish's role in the side has never had a goal contribution focused whilst being at Manchester City. During the treble-winning season, Jack Grealish, Riyad Mahrez and Bernardo Silva were Pep's go-to options on the wings, thanks to their ability to hold on to the ball under pressure and their preference for receiving a pass to feet rather than running in behind. Grealish and Silva in particular both offered an unbelievable defensive work rate that also became an invaluable asset for Manchester City over the course of the treble-winning season. In the final third of the pitch, City's wingers were instructed not to take on their fullback around the outside. Instead, they were often instructed to be calculated in the way they carried the ball, often dragging players towards them rather than actually trying to get past them. This not only meant that spaces were being created inside the pitch, but City's other players could move further up the pitch, pinning the opposition back into eventual submission. Simply advancing as a unit was one advantage, but they were also able to quickly regroup if they lost their shape and in a position to counter-press if the possession was lost. Establishing control like this allowed the central players like Gundogan and Kevin De Bruyne to flourish in those central areas, whether that's penetrating with bursting runs through the inside channel in between the opposition centre-back and full-back, often found with a cute pass inside by the likes of Jack Grealish or Bernardo Silva, or simply arriving late into the box as the spare man to finish off a move. Pep's strict style for his wide players made them serve the collective rather than express their individuality. But Pep knew there was a problem coming up in the 23-24 season, and Pep being Pep, he planned his upcoming response to the potential response of opposing managers before these managers even had a chance to implement their response. Opposing managers were utilising a very narrow defensive shape and allowing our controlling wide players like Jack Grealish and Bernardo Silva to have the ball out wide with no more than one opposition player being drawn over to the wings to confront them. Often the opposition fullbacks didn't even engage with the winger at all, instead asking their attacking wide players to drop deeper into defence and engage with them instead. As a result, not only did City struggle to find spaces through inside channels, but Erling Haaland was suffocated out of certain games altogether. Pep tried to alleviate this by pushing Guardiola or Walker forward, and sometimes both, to try and stretch and open up the channels in the opposition's defence. This approach ultimately worked and City won a 4th Premier League title in a row, but we lived incredibly dangerously at times, being caught on the counter-attack so frequently with Guardiola and Walker both pushing so far forward. Pep Guardiola is known for his build-up and midfield fundamentals, but his ability to adapt in the final third is a totally underappreciated feather in his cap, and the signing of Jeremy Doku was proof that Pep Guardiola had every idea what opposing managers were planning for the upcoming season, as well as the comments that he made during the 23-24 season on Jeremy Doku.
It is difficult to find today in the world football players like dribble. You know, all the managers say, don't lose the ball, don't dribble, pass the ball, don't dribble. The wingers has to dribble. Well, I don't like to dribble 60 meters, but an 80-yard box. Take a risk, dribble, it's your talent, and find them is not easy. And they know they have all the freedom to, in that area, take the decisions they have to take, but mainly he takes a good decision.
These comments are in complete contrast to the strategy that saw Pep sending Jack Grealish onto the pitch purely to hold on to the ball, to bring other players into the action, as well as asking Grealish not to take on his fullback. As usual with Pep, in his final third tactics, it completely depends on what the opposition are doing. Grealish has never been consistent at beating his fullback. Manchester City's treble-winning season saw Jack Grealish finish 24th in the the Premier League for most successful dribbles. But as I've already mentioned, this wasn't a problem for Pep when the final third plan was never for Grealish to beat the fullback in the first place, but rather to control our attacks to create wider passing lanes. But Pep devised a new plan for the 23-24 season, and the first step in this plan was signing Jeremy Doku. An example of Pep's plan was in the second half of the FA Cup final against United. Wan-Bissaka was handling the threat of Guardiola down the left-hand side, but the sheer presence of the second half substitute Doku required two defenders, as Doku so often does. Doku scored and created the spaces City needed, but unfortunately the damage had already been done in the first half. By the end of the 23-24 Premier League season, Grealish finished 118th in the Premier League for successful dribbles, and this was over 2,124 minutes, compared to Doku, who finished second in the Premier League for successful dribbles, playing only 181 minutes more than Grealish. Now, this fact alone doesn't showcase Pep's new plan, but add the fact on the other side of the pitch, Bernardo Silva had significantly increased his successful dribbling output, which will have been under new instructions from Pep Guardiola. Then add the fact that both our two fullbacks, Kyle Walker and Josko Gvardiol, had a higher number of successful dribbles than Grealish did, with minutes on the pitch obviously playing a role in that, as well as both being simultaneously used as hybrid centre-back/wingers. And finally, adding the fact that City have doubled down on fast-paced, aggressive, ball-carrying wingers by signing Savio. Savio, who finished the 23-24 season with the highest number of dribbles completed in the whole of La Liga. So with Pep adding another dribbling wizard to his squad, clearly there's a new strategy at play. So the first point to this new approach is to have wide players that can single-handedly break down an opposition defence whilst scoring and assisting. Jeremy Doku in the 23-24 season got 17 goal contributions to his name. Compare that to Jack Grealish, who in the 22-23 treble winning season for Manchester City got 16 goal contributions to his name, but played 1,000 minutes more than Jeremy Doku. Savio managed 21 goal contributions in the 23-24 season, and again, this was over fewer minutes. Wide players that offer this goal contribution output negate the importance of a goal contribution from the central midfielders. Instead, the midfielders can revert back to being focused on a ball retention and transition prevention role. As a result, this takes the immense pressure off Rodri to hold down two positions as a defensive midfielder and a box-to-box midfielder, which, being Rodri, he made it look incredibly easy, but that's just Rodri. But it's certainly not sustainable. Opposition teams most frequently use two strategies to keep City at bay: defending narrowly, allowing City to have the ball in wider areas, or simply opting for a man-to-man. Both of these defensive approaches can be breached by individual moments of dribbling brilliance or just the knowledge of their capabilities. The narrow defence can be disrupted by the simple presence of a take-on threat from the likes of a Doku or a Savio, forcing an extra player out of their narrow defensive shape, creating those inside passing lanes that Pep is looking for. The goal is the same as before, to create that space, but Pep is using a different tool to create that space. Every tool set needs a hammer, but with the signing of Savio, Pep could effectively be dual-wielding hammers on either side of the pitch with Doku and Savio. Alternatively, the opposition could employ a man-to-man defensive setup, which against Doku and Savio would be a very brave ploy. Isolating the fullbacks against the likes of Jeremy Doku would bring the advice of Thierry Henry into the picture, who once said, "When you're one-on-one with him, there's only one thing left to do: pray." Adding Savio to the opposite wing not only adds balance to City's attack, providing an equal threat on both sides of the pitch, but the byproduct of this threat also stretches the opposition's back line. If the opposition decides to double up against Doku or Savio, this will create the spaces we want between the fullback and the centre-back for the likes of Foden or Kevin De Bruyne to ghost into unmarked, and that's without the need for the winger to even take on their fullback. The opposition may choose to defend narrowly without two players being lured over to the wings and say, break us down if you can. But that's when we equip Doku and Savio, our two hammers, to break them down and beat their fullbacks around the outside, get to the byline and cross those in hard and low for the likes of Erling Haaland, who feeds off these types of crosses. Developing that understanding and relationship between Haaland and the wide players will be key, of course. Crosses from the byline are a nightmare to defend against, and once Haaland sees Doku or Savio bursting past the fullbacks to the byline, that will be his green light to sprint into the box with one of his trademark runs. In the 23-24 campaign, Haaland's relationship with City's wide players often lacked the necessary chemistry. Chopping back or dummying across will of course maintain the ball and give City the option to play it inside again, but with teams working out that that's what Grealish wanted to do, it became predictable and difficult for City to break down the opposition's narrow defensive shape. When teams knew that that ball was very likely to be recycled back in field, it not only gave the opposition defence time to set themselves for any potential incoming cross, it also frustrated the life out of Erling Haaland, who can only benefit from these crosses when he has an understanding of exactly when that cross will arrive. This now brings into question Jack Grealish's future at Manchester City, with Pep clearly going for a different attacking style, or at least giving City a new option to their attacking styles. Is there room for Jack Grealish out wide? Personally, I'd like to see Jack Grealish revert back to those Aston Villa days, which saw him play more of a free-spirited central role, and see City pay £100 million for the services of Jack Grealish. But is he going to get in the starting 11 ahead of Kevin De Bruyne or ahead of Phil Foden in those positions? Very unlikely. And is he going to be happy to just be a £100 million squad rotation player? I don't think he is. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.
This is typical City now.